You buy Bitcoin, you hold it for more than 4 years, Joe. That's my advice to everybody.
Fair to say you simply flooded the system with money?
Yes, we did. That's another way to think about it.
Where does it come from? Do you just print it?
We print it digitally.
I'm very bullish on the long-term viability of Bitcoin.
I was going to say, did that surprise you?
That surprised me how much that's gone up.
Hey, Internet, welcome back to another episode of New Foundations, the podcast brought to you by Acropolis, the Bitcoin Treasury company. We're back in the studio this week with my co-host, co-founder, and CEO of Acropolis, Chase Palmieri. He has many titles. And we're joined by Lisa Hough. Lisa is a mentor of mine from time to time, so I'm really excited to have her on the pod. She's also a member of the board at Melanion Digital, Proof of Workforce, Bitcoin Today Coalition. She formerly worked at Custodia Bank and Unchained Capital. So really excited to have you on the show and ask you some interesting questions, Lisa.
Well, I have been looking forward to it, Mason. I remember the day that we met, so this is going to be fun. I love this. Now you run a Bitcoin company with Chase. I love this.
There we go. Yeah, last time, I think when we met, or definitely when we met, I was still at eBay. So now finally doing it full time.
Yep, I know. Proud of you.
Thank you very much. I think most of the listeners know who you are, but if you could just really quickly give us a background on you that I didn't already mention, or maybe your Bitcoin story. How did you get into Bitcoin?
Yeah, okay. Really quickly, 100 years ago, I was a natural gas trader, which I thought was absolutely the best job on earth because it is high paying and at that time, relatively low hours. The market closed at 2:05 Houston time. So I would generally get to work super early, but by 2:05, you're done, right? Like, pretty great. And then I had a baby, and then she was the best work that I've ever had. And I brag just painfully, relentlessly about her. But she and I both discovered Bitcoin, which seems like yesterday, actually. I've been talking to some real OGs lately. And it reminds me that I literally got here practically yesterday. But I found Bitcoin because my financial advisor fired me. I had gone to him and said, I'm not really interested in all of these funds that you have me in. I don't want to be in real estate, investment trusts, and I don't want to be, I had this whole list. And he said, well, what do you want to be in? And I said, I want to be in energy, tech, like Amazon. This is kind of 2018. So, Amazon was sort of an exciting stock still to watch. Anyway, he fired me and he said, we don't work like that. You don't know what you're doing. And I just said, okay, fine. So I went about trying to figure out where to, move my account and what to invest in. And the topic that kept coming up actually was reading the MIT Tech Review. They published a list of the top 50 technologies every year from 2010 to 2017. So I took those lists, I built a giant Excel spreadsheet, tried to look for, signal. And what I kept coming across was this word blockchain. And it became really evident that if I bought blockchain, I was going to be magically rich. So then you go to your best friend Google and you say, how do I buy blockchain? And then you get hit in the face, like literally hit in the face with all of these scams and send your money to, Binance, China or Asia. I don't even know, like all these offshore exchanges. I couldn't even figure out how to send them money. They were so complicated. And I just had this really kind of ick feeling that I shouldn't be sending them money. But nevertheless, found my way to Bitcoin, and really thanks to Parker Lewis, who I know you guys know, just became hugely, passionately engrossed in the Bitcoin meets energy conversation. So using my background in the energy space, I've lived in Houston almost my entire life, energy capital of the world. Trying to spread the virus among the energy companies and my friends. I just found that I was working in Bitcoin. So here we are.
There we go. Shout out to Parker. I think I've said this a lot, but I think his book, Gradually Then Suddenly, is the best Bitcoin book there is. It really does break down each concern one might have on a particular subject on Bitcoin, which energy is in there about how Bitcoin is actually good for the environment. Um, so you mentioned that you were a commodities trader in Houston. That's where you got started, which is very mathematical. It's very supply and demand, creates the price and you trade that. And in Bitcoin, obviously it's very mathematical as well, but a lot of people try to create these mathematical models to predict Bitcoin's price. And one that's very popular right now is the stock to flow model. So curious, given your background, if you are a fan of that, if do you have any interest in the stock to flow model or
Yeah, no, I have interest in what people theorize. I think that people reach those conclusions. They build the models and they reach conclusion, and their thinking is probably sound. I just think all bets are off. We can't look at Bitcoin the way that we've looked at the traditional markets. I really would argue that people don't even know what they're buying when they buy Bitcoin. I mean, like, really, they don't understand absolute scarcity. And I think it's a fool's errand to try to trade Bitcoin, which people tell me that they do. Again, I'm a non-judger. You can do you. And, certainly my financial advisor thought I was an idiot for wanting to buy these things to begin with. So, everybody learns. So yeah, I'm interested in the models. I don't put any credence, nor do I think that they ever come true. I think that, just looking back in time, if I were going to compare Bitcoin to something, I think I would maybe make the comparison to energy markets, because they are supply and demand driven. Obviously, we know we can't change the supply of Bitcoin. We know what the issuance schedule will be. But on the demand side, it's so complicated and geopolitical. I think what moves the needle, I think what will move the needle in a huge way is Russia's embrace of Bitcoin. 2023, they announced that they mined 1 out of every 5 Bitcoin. That should really make us frightened and scared and demand that we begin mining in the United States, like in full force, with full support of the US government. 38 countries stood together and took a picture, and they call themselves BRICS. And to me, that was a gigantic FU to the United States and the US dollar. We need to listen to that. Our regulators, the people who are in power, I think are starting to pick up the scent. There are lots of arguments to be made that this industry can be very supportive of the dollar, right? Stablecoin adoption is basically broadening the dollar's reach to other countries. But I think we've overstepped in the form of maybe our political opinions or regulatory opinions. We've overstepped without thinking through the long game. What are we actually trying to do? And all of that to say, Bitcoin is the ultimate long game, right? Bitcoin, we shouldn't be here, guys. We shouldn't be on a podcast talking about anything related to money. And I think Bitcoin is the best form of money that the world has ever seen. It's the only form of property that can be held by every human on earth, regardless of their property rights. Right? But shouldn't money that is finite, shouldn't that be just a right that everyone has? We weren't created to go get money, right? We're put here by God to go do good things, right? Go define good things by yourself. But being lost in this constant analysis of price, and let's argue about whether this is money or store of value. Like, I also think that those conversations are fool's errands. I think the jig is up. This will be the money of the world. We're already starting to see other nations embrace it. Russia has accepted it for global trade, which they should. We cut them out of the SWIFT system and said you can't sell your energy for dollars. And so, okay, they're the second largest producer of natural gas in the world. We'll mine Bitcoin and then we'll sell it and we'll buy anything we want from anyone we want. Right? Like, it's almost, the US has just tried to play parent and ground other countries from participating in certain activities. Like, the jig is up. That is over.
Yeah, and to your point about Russia adopting Bitcoin for global trade, they have their own kind of hash rate going, as you said, mining 1 in every 5 Bitcoin. And the fact that Russia and these other BRIC countries are trying to come together, trying to negotiate a new currency that they can use for global trade, whereas in the background, we see these countries kind of dipping their toes into Bitcoin. And these are obviously very energy and commodity rich nations seeking an alternative currency for this cross-border trade. Do you believe that when all of the negotiating is done and tired everyone out, that these countries are just going to settle on Bitcoin for cross-border trade?
I mean, I would, right? I heard someone yesterday, who was it? I don't know. It was one of the big VC investors, Chamath Palmentieri, and he was saying he runs a company and was going to start taking stablecoin, I think, instead of Visa. And I mean, the numbers that he mentioned that he would save in transaction fees were staggering. And so if you think of that on a global scale, obviously Russia isn't transacting with Visa, but how many money handlers, foreign exchange desks, traders, bankers, right? How many people touch the transaction before it lands from party A to the intended recipient? Right? I mean, one of the mining companies tells a story that they were sitting at the table closing a transaction with a foreign party, and the entire transaction was in jeopardy because they couldn't figure out how to get the money to the counterparty. Right? It was, well, this bank won't take it, so okay, well, what if we send it to this bank and then this bank sends it here? And someone said, well, couldn't we just send Bitcoin? And that's what they did, right? Like, does that just make sense? Yeah. Like, we need to stop. It's almost as though we're creating false speed bumps or false toll booths or, I don't know, false drawbridges that don't need to exist anymore.
Yeah, so Max Kaiser is famous for saying that hash rate precedes price. So do you agree? And if so, can you explain the order of operations and, sort of the logic that leads to that case?
I think there's a lot of conversation on whether hash rate leads price or the other way around. Again, I think that the way that we have modeled Bitcoin is just, it's maybe more relevant in a traditional financial market. I think from a hash rate standpoint, the people that know, right, the people that have energy and know how to do this are plugging in machines as fast as they can. And that could be an entity or that could be an individual. I mean, you guys know, you go to Bitcoin conferences. I go to Bitcoin conferences. Like, we're all plugging in different Bitcoin mining rigs, regardless of if the energy cost makes sense, right? We all just know that we need Bitcoin. And so, is hash rate correlated to price? I don't know. I mean, I think sovereigns start buying it. They're not looking at hash rate. They're not going, oh, well, look, the hash rate's going higher, so maybe we should get some. They're going, wait, are you telling me if I have this, then I can transact anytime I want with anyone I want instead of going through the United States, right? Instead of working with the dollarized world. Like, I mean, that's the reason why the price is going to just jump dramatically, in my opinion. And I think it jumps dramatically from here very soon.
And even if you don't think sovereigns are looking at hash rate when it comes to, making the decision to acquire the asset for a strategic reserve, I do believe, and I've heard you mention on other podcasts, that you believe having hash rate, we can just focus in on the United States. The United States ensuring that we have a sufficient amount of hash rate here in the United States, that is a matter of national security. So can you speak to that a little bit?
I would love to. And unfortunately, I had to close all my browsers when we jumped on here because I don't know my computer, whatever. But I'll point you guys to some really interesting research that I discovered, and they're short articles. But okay, so why is onshore hash rate or US hash rate a matter of national security? And again, I want to just preface this with this is a long game conversation. This isn't about price. So I started doing some research on the Strategic Petroleum Reserve. Like, when did we start that? When did we think that that was necessary? And I won't put you on the spot by asking you when it was, because everyone that I've asked has said the same thing. And that is, well, when the Arab nations were blah, 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 and the price of oil quadrupled and, okay. No, that isn't actually correct. The Strategic Petroleum Reserve was basically a product of the Spanish-American War, which was the end of the 1800s, early 1900s. The U.S., all of our Navy ran on coal. And in fact, the last coal-fired naval ship was the USS Texas. And I think that was built like in 1912. I don't know. Don't quote me on those numbers. But the whole Navy ran on coal. And there was a huge, fuss up during the Spanish-American War, and 43 of the U.S. warships were away from the battle. They were at recoaling stations. And the U.S. realized, wow, like we need a way to transport more energy for our ships so that they can be, on the scene, right? And there was a lot of conversation in the UK, in Britain, and in the US, like, should we convert our ships from coal to, this newfangled oil? It was looking back historically at we were not prepared for what was ahead of us. So let's do this, right? And shortly thereafter, we went to oil on our naval vessels. So that's the early 1900s. The other thing that I didn't know, maybe you guys are deeper into history than I was on this topic, but during World War II, our allies, the Allied forces in France, and thank you to our partners in the UK, but in Britain, in England, like 6 billion of the 8 billion barrels of oil that were needed to win the war in 1944-45 were provided by the United States. And we actually ran in 1944, we ran an undersea cable underneath the English Channel so that our oil could go to England. From England, it could leave their coast and then go down to Bologna, I think, somewhere in France. Like, think about the technology that happened in those early days. Like, everyone thought Nord Stream was this huge deal, right? It's like, okay, well, now I find out that we've actually been doing this since the 40s. So fast forward, I'm going to just tell you one more historical story, and then I'm going to tie this all together.
No, I love it.
But okay, so fast forward to the 80s, we're in the Cold War with Russia, and Russia was actually building the Trans-Siberian pipeline to supply Europe with fuel. And we went to our allies, Germany, France, Italy, England. We went to them and said, don't give them any people, don't give them technology, don't sell anything to Russia. We don't want them to be able to build this pipeline, because if they can't sell their energy, they'll go broke and we'll win the Cold War. That's really, in essence, what was happening. This is like 1980, 82, 80. It's the very early 80s. So, as you might not expect, our allies said, F you, United States. This is our energy security. We're not going to be left in the cold because your political advisors have said, this is going to help you win this fight with Russia. Like, our allies, think about that. They did defy the request, and it wasn't really a request, by the US government. So, long way to say, energy security is national security. I am a huge advocate for Bitcoin mining because it strengthens the grid. That's a very popular narrative, and I think it's true. The thing that I'm a lot more concerned about and really focused on in my professional work right now is this notion of off-grid mining. We need to spread the hash rate to places that aren't connected to the grid, because when, and not if, when Iran or China or Russia attacks our power grids, we, for the long term, will need to have hash rate onshore, right? Because can you imagine if we have all of our Bitcoin mining connected to the grid, and then our grid gets attacked, and so therefore, let's say it's 10 years from now, right? We're future projecting. We're way ahead of, 43 battleships being away from the battle during the Spanish-American War because they're recoaling, right? We're going to be forward thinkers. If Bitcoin will be the financial system that the whole world runs on, which I firmly believe it will be, everyone transacts on Bitcoin. In order to get your transactions included in blocks, you need miners, right? And so imagine us going to our allies and saying, hey, our grid is down, allies, can you process our financial transactions for us? History shows our allies don't always cooperate. They might be more concerned with processing all of their transactions. They may not have enough miners on their shores to protect themselves from what would be being locked out of, same like we've locked Russia out of SWIFT. We'd essentially be self-censoring ourselves, the United States, from being able to process financial transactions. And so building resilient off-grid, and that's what I'm talking about, like putting mining out on a pad site where oil and gas is coming out of the ground, right? I mean, let's do that. There is a ton of opportunity. I get calls every week from folks in the energy business. One that I got, which was just particularly touching, was a guy out in West Texas who explained to me that his small energy company, a family-owned energy company, they had a well, and it was on the site of an elementary school. And the well had been there, I don't know, a long time. The school had only recently been built. Let's say the school was built in the last 10 or 20 years. But the well was old, and they were flaring the gas. There was takeaway for the oil. There was a pipeline there, right? But they were flaring the methane on an elementary school ground. And he finds me how, whoever knows how. And he says, can you help me? Like, I think I should mine Bitcoin here and use this gas. Can you come do this? And I'm working with Dan Morrison, and, we just said, you don't need us. Dan got online and looked for a generator and some equipment and, created a really simple spreadsheet and said, we'll help you, but like, here's what you need to do. And it's not it wasn't very expensive for them to solve this problem. But it could be something as small as that, but it also could be, you've got associated gas coming up with an oil well. And again, the midstream is really under pressure, especially in West Texas, New Mexico. There are not enough pipelines in order to take what is produced out of that region and take it to a market really where you can be. Well, there is a lack of pipelines. Let's just say that. And where there are pipelines, they fill up. So there's a lot of gas out there that's, people are either having to practically give away. There's a pipeline out there that 47% of the last 12 months, it traded negative, right? So a producer theoretically was having to pay to have gas taken. I mean, you don't do it. You shut in, or you flare if you can, or right? But so Bitcoin mining uniquely solves an operational problem for those guys. It's also just accretive, right? It's valuable for your business. It adds value to your business. And again, the long game is it is directly related to the United States national security. And I'm sorry if I'm ranting or like preaching, but I feel like this just is not a conversation that we have frequently enough. And I'm so grateful when somebody asks me a question about it, because I just hope like there's one person listening who will pick this thread up and can carry the ball further than I can.
Embrace the future of corporate finance with Acropolis, your strategic partner for a Bitcoin treasury strategy. We're the experts your business needs. Acropolis offers trusted Bitcoin advisory. We provide you with an outsourced Bitcoin strategy officer, world-class research, an accretive financing team, and more, so you can navigate Bitcoin's market with confidence and acumen. Best-in-class custody with multi-institution custody. Eliminate the risk of loss while maintaining full control of real Bitcoin. Acropolis exclusively uses multi-institution custody as the safest and easiest way for businesses to hold Bitcoin. Bitcoin-only solutions. The Acropolis platform is designed for businesses of all sizes to seamlessly manage their Bitcoin treasury, and we focus solely on Bitcoin to offer you the most specialized services available. Adding Bitcoin to your balance sheet is just the beginning. With Acropolis, you're not just adopting Bitcoin, you're mastering its strategic use to create and maintain value for generations. Take the first step and start your corporate Bitcoin journey with Acropolis. Book your free consultation today at acropolistreasury.com/book and start implementing our proven strategies within days. Absolutely. I'm not sure if it's because I went to school in West Texas, so I have a fondness for people involved in energy and I've been around it, but that's one of my favorite things about Bitcoin is the way that it does take this wasted energy. I mean, flared gas is just a complete waste. It is not positive to anyone. And to be able to take that and put it to something useful or incentivize the build out of energy in remote places where normally there would have never been an incentive to do so. It's truly one of my favorite pieces of Bitcoin, and I think this is being realized more broadly, but more importantly by the upcoming administration. So we're 6 days away from a new administration. Many people think it's a new start. It's a lot of fresh energy, pro-business, pro-Bitcoin energy. So curious, what pro-Bitcoin policies do you anticipate we're going to see over the next 4 to 8 years? And what's exciting you the most?
Well, let's just start with the fact that Donald Trump doesn't hate Bitcoin, right? I think that's just an enormous win. And we may not like what comes out of his mouth, but I do think he speaks his mind. I do think that he's truthful, right? We may not love some of the things that come out of his mind. I don't know. I personally am not at all flustered by Donald Trump. Maybe it's because I worked on a trading floor for so long. I'm just used to men that speak their mind. Maybe we live in a world where this whole political correctness can sort of shift back to the middle. I mean, I like civility. I love manners. I love men that open a door or pull out your chair or, all of that. But this whole notion that you can't tell a woman that she's beautiful, or like we have just taken it so far. And I use that example because Charles Payne, I don't know if you saw the interview with Natalie Brunell, but at the end of it, he complimented her and he was like, "Oh, I know you recently got married and you're just glowing and you look beautiful, or you look great," or something like that. And then he was like, "Oh, wait, I can't say that." And he was like, "Oh, no, wait, I can. We have a new president," right? Like, can we just be people? Let's be good to one another. I mean, it's just really that simple. That's the ultimate long game. Like, let's just be good to one another. How can you take your talent and go do something that is uniquely you, that no one else can do? And Mason, hats off to you, because when we first met, you were really trying to spread the message of Bitcoin at a gigantic company, and you made some big progress over there, right? You got some incredible help, which I won't dox anyone here. You can if you want, but like, you have done a lot for the space. You guys having the company that you have today, I mean, it is uniquely the two of you. It is this incredible contribution that you can make. You don't have to go be like anyone else. You can just, sky's the limit, literally, in Bitcoin. Go figure out what it is that you love to talk about and go do it. And so hats off to you too. I love what you're doing.
Thank you. Yeah. And just to kind of maybe double click on that, when it comes to the Trump administration and maybe the opportunities for Trump and that administration to work directly with energy companies or Bitcoin miners, is there anything there that you want to see? Maybe don't expect to see, but want to see happen over the next 4 years?
Yeah. I think that if you are an energy company and you are mining off grid, or you're in a partnership with a miner, however you structure the deal, I think that you should have a tax credit. If we are going to give incentives to solar and wind and all these virtue signaling, greenwashing initiatives, we need to really consider what the long game is here. The long game is our ability to transact on a global stage, right? National security is three things. It is first and foremost a strong economy, right? We want people to have great jobs. We want great businesses here. We want wealth and prosperity and good health outcomes. We need all of those things so that we can protect ourselves from having other people come across our borders. Now, number two, obviously, we need a standing military. When you talk about national security, everybody always thinks of the Navy and all that. Okay, yeah, you need a strong standing military. And three, you need a really strong, you need strong negotiators, empathetic listeners in the diplomatic corps, right? We need diplomats who can go to our allies and have these conversations knowledgeably, technically, empathetically, so that everyone understands what the stakes are, right? Everyone should have Bitcoin mining onshore. It should be top of every country's initiatives. And, I was on the phone with a group in Paraguay. They were like, "Oh, we're having all this trouble." The people came and the government came and they met with us and they looked at our plans. And the minute we said Bitcoin, it was like, "No." And they all walked out. I mean, like, give me 30 minutes with those people, right? Let me explain to you how, as Paraguay or some other country, this is your financial protection. This is finally your ability to earn your own money and do what you want with your own money, right? You're not beholden to conversion to the dollar, only trading with certain counterparties. Like, it is your ticket out of the financial slavery that has been. And so, anyway, the strong diplomatic presence, especially educated about Bitcoin, Bitcoin mining, the energy space, I think would be critical. I mean, like, especially with the countries who have large energy portfolios, right? Qatar, Kuwait. I mean, those will be really key appointments that Donald Trump makes, and I really hope that those people that are graced with those roles are either aware of Bitcoin, Bitcoiners, surrounded by Bitcoiners.
Yeah, lovely. It's kind of like a subheader to energy independence is hash rate independence, and maybe that'll become a term we start hearing more of. Turning to kind of a different avenue of the sovereign adoption of strategic Bitcoin reserves. We know that the Biden administration is currently sitting on, or maybe has begun selling, unfortunately, about 200,000 coins confiscated from Silk Road. And I'm curious if you think that we should ask of our governments, whether just in the United States or globally, that when the government confiscates Bitcoins as a result of illegal activity, that they publicly burn those Bitcoins as opposed to adding them to their reserves. Because my concern here, and I'm just kind of throwing it out there, curious to see if you've thought this through, is that if governments are allowed to confiscate Bitcoins from Bitcoiners for quote unquote illegal activities, rather than having to burn them, that it actually creates an incentive for governments to persecute or criminalize Bitcoiners as a way of trying to bolster their own Bitcoin reserves. So curious if you think that that's something we need to keep an eye on as nation states start to adopt Bitcoin.
I had not thought that through. Thank you for walking me through your logic. I absolutely track. There's nothing like holding your own keys. It's going to be hard for governments to criminalize Bitcoin without all of us leaving, right? If the US made Bitcoin illegal, I would not sell my Bitcoin in order to keep my passport. I mean, I love the US. I love what we stand for, stand for again. Liberty, freedom, private property rights, freedom of speech. But I would leave if they made Bitcoin illegal, right? This is the most pure form of private property to ever exist. This is like everyone gets to buy a home. Oprah's like, you get a house and you get a car and you get a car or whatever. Like, anybody that buys Bitcoin, all of a sudden you have shelter for the rest of your life, right? You have financial protection for the rest of your life. Hold it for one cycle and your whole life changes. And so, and I can't remember who, maybe it was American HODL, I think, put out a tweet yesterday that was something like, if you buy $1,000 worth of Bitcoin, I don't know, he did the math. It was like, if you buy this small amount of Bitcoin and you hold it for 25 years, you will have this very nice nest egg, right? And we know that these things are true because scarcity drives value, right? Even if the whole market goes down, right? There's now this whole conversation, is Bitcoin risk on or risk off? I don't know. I don't actually think it matters. If you don't understand scarcity, why does it matter what bucket you want to put it in? It's the scarcest form of property that there is, right? I used to use Malibu real estate as an example when I would go speak to people. But, Malibu real estate was very scarce and very valuable. It's tragic what has happened. And yes, you can lose your Bitcoin, and that would be tragic. But, you can also protect your Bitcoin. So I don't know. I think that with Cynthia Lummis and the folks that are involved, David Bailey, I mean, hats off to both of them for everything that they've done to further this with the Trump administration. I mean, I think that President Trump will surround himself with really good teams of folks. I don't see the U.S. confiscating our Bitcoin. I guess I'm knocking on wood.
Yeah, definitely knock on wood. But that's why we, at Acropolis are in favor of multi-institution custody, because that way you aren't reliant on the risks of self-custody, multi-sig, whether that be the technical aspect of it or the physical aspect of the devices and seed phrases and all that. But multi-institutions where you're entrusting institutions to hold keys in a multi-sig quorum on your behalf, which, in our case, it would require multiple governments colluding together in order to do that. You mentioned private property, and I know that earlier last year you sold a house in favor of buying more Bitcoin, a house that once meant a lot to you. So I'd love to give you the opportunity to walk through your thought process on that and how it's worked out so far, because I have a feeling it's worked out very well.
I wish I could tell you that it has. Unfortunately, I did not end up selling my house. I did have my house on the market. My dad went into hospice and he passed away in September. And I just felt like I need one less thing that's moving in my life. So I had it on the market last summer very briefly. I'm going to put it back on the market. You know what? It's not that the house means that much to me. It's just, this is where I live, right? Couldn't be in a better neighborhood in Houston. It's a high rise. It's safe. We have tons of security. And it's not very expensive, really. And so that's my goal, is like, let's cut expenses so that we can buy more Bitcoin, hold Bitcoin, stop selling Bitcoin, right? Like, I hate selling it, but sometimes I have to. If I have huge expenses, we had a lot of help. My siblings and I hired a lot of help for our dad when he was in hospice so that he was never by himself. He always had someone there. And I sold Bitcoin to do it. And it was 100% the best sale of Bitcoin ever. I can't think of a better reason. So, but again, like, I've had Bitcoin longer than one cycle. So when you have Bitcoin longer than one cycle, it gives you this real ability. I hate to say the F word on these things anymore, because certain people that I'm around don't love when I use profanity, but like, it gives you that FU money, right? Like, I can go do whatever I want. You can't stop me. I don't have to keep working for a company I don't like. I've walked away from romantic relationships because I have Bitcoin, because somebody wants me to quit my job, or, I'm like, no, I absolutely love what I do. I have the greatest job ever. I wake every day and I talk to the smartest people who are building awesome companies, and they're doing it around Bitcoin. Like, I'm not quitting my job. So without getting into a whole dating rant, which I totally could, because no one's truthful about money, right? And I have dated people that have tons of it, tons and tons, and they're never truthful. They always think they have the right answer, and they always think I'm an idiot because I own Bitcoin. And I'm like, bye. Like, it's not negotiable.
That's an easy litmus test.
Big time. But I have this rule. I won't date anyone that works in Bitcoin, because I don't want you guys like talking about me behind my back. Right. And I'm like, I wish I could date a Bitcoiner that was in the Bitcoin space. So I'm like, I will not. I have a rule. So it's a real quandary.
Well, speaking of hating to sell your Bitcoin, kind of turning back to the mining industry, we're seeing some interesting developments there where a lot of the public miners have begun hodling the Bitcoin that they mine, not actually letting that supply become available to the market. And in some cases, like with Marathon Digital Holdings, they are actually raising capital to go into the spot market and buy more Bitcoin for their treasuries. So obviously that has it shrinks the available supply of what is already the scarcest asset known to mankind. But if this trend continues and we see all of the Bitcoin miners hodling, because who understands the upside of Bitcoin better than somebody that got into the mining space, and then they start raising capital and deploying that into spot market to acquire even more Bitcoin, if this trend picks up and all of the miners begin hodling and spot buying, obviously, we're going to see an increase in price. I don't need you to speculate to that, but what are kind of the downstream consequences if that really plays out?
I think the major downstream consequence to that is that, I mean, I love thinking about Bitcoin making it into brand new hands, right? I love, um, I have the world's greatest chiropractor, and I pay him in Bitcoin, and I love doing it because he wasn't a Bitcoiner. He probably still isn't a Bitcoiner, but he has promised me that he was not going to sell his Bitcoin. And I love that, he has a young family and a couple of kids and a really just incredible wife and just all the right family values, in my opinion. I love when people discover Bitcoin, and I've been paying him in Bitcoin maybe for I don't know, since it was in the 40s, right? So it's in the 90s today. It's worked out well. So I love that feeling that he can look at that money and go, wow, this is actually allowing me to go whatever, right? Like his money didn't lose value in his bank account. The eggs didn't continue to get more expensive compared to how many dollars he has. So I think that to me is the downside of any large company creating a Bitcoin treasury. Am I glad they're doing it? Yes. But because am I glad? Maybe that's not the right answer. Do I think it's responsible that companies broadly, I mean, beyond the miners, are starting to consider Bitcoin as a treasury asset? I actually think it's shareholder responsibility to your shareholders and your stakeholders. And that's what I've
Absolutely.
been telling the energy companies for a long time is that, look, if I can come illustrate to you how mining Bitcoin on your midstream asset gas processing plant, like now that I've demonstrated to you how financially accretive this is, like even if you just sell the Bitcoin, right? But the process of mining, like, isn't it your responsibility to do that, right? Isn't it as a corporate entity, like you work for other people, you work for your shareholders or your stakeholders? And so it's been interesting to watch egos adapt to this idea over time. So I think every company should hold Bitcoin, but I think every person should hold Bitcoin, right? This whole notion of should it be 1% or 2% or whatever percent, I don't know. For me, it's more than that, but you can't hold zero. That's for sure.
If it's good for your personal balance sheet, then it's definitely good for your business balance sheet. That's for sure. It's really funny you mentioned chiropractor because I recently went on zero, meaning I don't own any dollars anymore. All I own is Bitcoin.
Love
And
that.
usually that's okay because I just spend on credit. I use all my normal credit cards, Apple Card, JP Morgan Chase, and just pay using various Bitcoin apps like Strike and Cash App and Fold have some bill pay features. But there was a chiropractor at my place here in Austin, and they were doing adjustments for the folks who live here. And then I realized I don't have any cash when it came time to pay him. And he doesn't have a credit card reader, so I go, what do I do? And I had to convince him, long story short, to download a Bitcoin app and let me send him some Bitcoin. And I was like, I know it sounds crazy, but that's just funny that we both mentioned the chiropractor example there.
No, so I met a chiropractor in Riga at the Honey Badger conference, which was amazing, by the way. I think it's the oldest Bitcoin conference in the world. And he was like from Denmark, maybe, and he was the head of like the Denmark Chiropractors Association. I don't know. He and his wife are longtime Bitcoiners. And he was like telling me his story and how he put a Bitcoin sign in his office and he's been taking Bitcoin for so long. And I came home and I told my chiropractor, and I was like, can I pay you in Bitcoin? Actually, what happened was I said, look, my insurance doesn't work with your office anymore. So I'm just paying you out of pocket, which is fine. You're totally worth it. But can I pay you in Bitcoin? Like, I met this chiropractor. To his credit, he was like, absolutely.
Didn't take much convincing. I'm going to send this to a good friend of mine who's in chiropractor school. It seems like they get it quicker than the typical person does. But Lisa, I really appreciate you coming on. This has been a great conversation. I think a lot of people will find it very helpful, all the energy talk and U.S. Strategic Reserve talk. So before we go, if you could just let the people know where to find you on socials.
Thank you for having me. I am easy to find, and I do get back to people if you send me a DM on LinkedIn. I do reply, unless you are pitching me your company or if you are pitching me a trading scam, or if you have words in your profile that I find repulsive, like Web3. I do reply. So it has been the biggest privilege that people do reach out and they say, hey, I actually, truthfully, had 2 of those calls this morning. That is how I started my day. One young guy, his wife is giving birth next week, hopefully, to their first child. He lives out on the West Coast, traditional financial background, but a hardcore Bitcoiner. How do I work in Bitcoin? Another guy.
Almost sounded like Chase there.
Sounds exactly
Yeah.
like me. Yeah.
Is your wife getting ready to have a baby?
Yeah. This week or next week. Yeah. And I'm on the West Coast and obviously a Bitcoiner.
Amazing.
If we had talked, I would have assumed you were kind of mentioning me there. Yeah.
Amazing. Well, congratulations.
Thank you.
The other guy that I spoke to, engaged, I won't dox where he lives, but he worked on nuclear sites. Hardcore Bitcoiner, thoroughly understands mining. Like, he would be an asset to any mining team. He has so much technical expertise and just like very emotionally skilled individual. He's very well respected on social media. Anyway, all that to say, it's a huge privilege when I do get to speak to folks, because often you tell me what you're building, and that gives me a lot of energy to keep going forward and saying the same thing on podcasts over and over and over. So reach out to me on LinkedIn. I have my own website too. It's just my name. It's lisahough.io. I think the calendar thing works again. It might not, but you can book an appointment. I will give 15 minutes to anybody. And if the call goes well, you'll have my phone number and you can call me anytime. So,
All right. Thanks, Lisa.
Thanks,
I
Lisa.
appreciate you guys.
Thanks for listening to this week's episode of the show. Quick reminder that New Foundations is for informational and entertainment purposes only, and nothing should be construed as investment, financial, or legal advice. Business owners, business operators, and those who are Bitcoin curious, let's connect. Visit acropolistreasury.com to learn more or to get in touch with our team.